welcome to Adobe Live. I am Hillary Niemer, joined here with Jonathan Pimento, both working on the the XD team together.
Yes. Hillary's actually one of the designers and one of the product managers on the XD team. Do you want to maybe add some context as to what you've been doing?
Sure. So as Jonathan said, I'm a UX designer on XD, so designing XD in XD. And I've been working on components for the last few months. So
awesome.
Yeah, so some of the features we're going to take a look at today.
Yeah, today's actually the next days are going to be really exciting. We're going to talk a lot about components, collaboration, building a design system, working with other designers, stakeholders, developers, all of it using XD. And Hillary's going to take us through some of that as well. Just some quick context as to who I am, what I've been doing. So I've been with Adobe for a while. My journey at Adobe actually started way back in 2013. Is my screen up at the moment? Oh, there we go. So I'm a senior product manager on the XD team. When I started with Adobe back in 2013, I was actually a part of the design team. So I was a designer here at Adobe, worked with the design team for around 3 years, and then made a switch to product management. And since then, I've sort of been involved in XD, worked on a couple of different things, design, prototyping. And it's really been a fun journey for me. I've worked on a bunch of different products, but I think the ones I've enjoyed the most were my first project at Adobe was actually Dreamweaver. And this was a really fun project for me because to go redesign an entire product, which has its legacy from almost over 10 to 15 years was a big challenge. And then to sort of work on a brand new product like XD where there was none of that legacy and completely open canvas to rethink what screen design meant. It's been a pretty fun challenge. So I literally always sum it up as like the two products I worked on, one was literally back from 1997 and the other one was literally something we kicked off in 2016. So it's been a fun journey for me and I am super thrilled and excited to sort of show you all some more around XD today.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we're excited to take a look at some of those features. I think we have a quick schedule to look at for today. So this week we are going to have, so we're looking at drawing an illustration in the morning, and then we'll be here every day at 11:30 taking a look at UX design.
I was just going to say, feel free to tell us what you want to see in the comments. We'd be more than happy to, sort of make sure we capture some of those in day 2, day 3. If there are specific areas of XD that you would love to understand how to use, we are here for that.
Yeah. And then we'll also have the chat and win today in about 30 minutes. And we'll also have your prize will be a sticker mule. And then we're also going to have the daily challenge, which we will review towards the end of the show, about 30 minutes left. And then, yeah, so
awesome.
maybe we could just jump into it.
All right. So I'm assuming everyone here is familiar with the May release, and if you weren't, you should definitely install the update that we just rolled out for XD because it has some amazing new features that we shipped. In fact, one of those features is components, which Hillary actually worked on. She was the designer for it. Hillary, do you want to talk a little bit about just high level what components are in XD?
Yeah, for sure. So components is kind of a reskin of what we used to call symbols.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea behind it is, I can try and talk a little bit louder, but it's the idea behind it is just reuse. So and helping the user, kind of work more efficiently and keep consistency. And then also kind of just building up on the idea of design systems, so being able to share those components with other people.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think one of the things we really wanted to introduce with this new model was just flexibility as well. So we'll get into talking about overrides.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. And with XD, we've always used that as an opportunity to reimagine everything that's existed within our own design tools, right? So the concept of symbols have been there since a really long time. If you look at Illustrator, if you look at so many other tools. But for us with XD, it was an opportunity to really think about, well, where is this going forward? What is the definition of design systems within XD? How could we help designers collaborate more effectively over these shared components? So that's where we sort of reimagined what symbols would mean for the next coming years. So let's sort of do a quick deep dive into components. I'll walk you through how to go about building components.
Cool.
We're going to touch a little bit about how you collaborate between them. And that's actually the fun part because Hillary and me will work together over a bunch of linked components. And you can see how as a team, you can actually share your components across documents. So what I have here is a quick sort of, an experience we put together for, imagine you're redesigning a national park website, right? So it's got a bunch of different screens, and the key thing over here is a lot of this is actually built using components. So if I start making changes to like one of these specific screens, you'll see how they sync. So the first step is how do we actually go about building a component? Let's do that. So here I've got a screen. I've got a bunch of different cards over here. I decide I want to reuse this across a couple of different places. So I'm going to go ahead and select these objects. Now, if you notice, this is just a regular selection. It's not yet a component. If you want to convert something into component, there are a couple of different ways. You can right click and say make component. You also have a shortcut, which is Command K. Now, if you are a user who leverages the asset panel, you can also go ahead and click on the plus button. So just 3 simple ways of creating something into a component. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the minute I do that, the first thing you'll notice is it gets a green decoration as well as this little diamond in the top left corner. Now what that indicates is this is your master component. Now if you've been using symbols in XD, you're probably familiar with the idea where there was no master that existed. You could just keep making changes from anywhere. Now what we are doing with this release is basically we do give you a master component where any changes that you make from this copy will sync across all the other copies for you.
Which is essentially the same behavior as symbols were before.
Exactly. And the way you identify if something is a master is by simply looking at the top left corner. So you can see in this case, it has a diamond. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this on my canvas. And you can see that when I make a copy, it still has the green decoration, but it no longer has the diamond. And what that specifically implies is that this is a copy of the component you just created. Now, the way I like to work is I usually like to separate out the master from the instances. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually move this maybe onto my pasteboard, or if you're really picky like the way I am, I actually keep a separate artboard just for all my masters. So I'm going to move that off onto this.
Cool.
Now I've got one instance here. I'm going to make another copy of this, probably a couple of more. You can see how these contextual padding and guides really help you a lot. Speaking of guides, one of the other things we actually released in the May release is the ability to draw guides.
Yay.
So you can simply draw a guide by dragging off on the edge of the artboard, and you can bring that in and help you snap your content to a grid or like specific endpoints that you want.
Awesome.
Now, you know what? I realize this is not right. I want to make some size changes to the padding. One of the things that users actually don't know about XD is you can actually multi-select a bunch of objects. And if you have responsive resize turned on, you can just resize them like this. So that's another quick way of adjusting your padding and spacing without it even having to be a group, right? So things like smartly distributing your objects can be done really simply with XD.
Super cool.
All right, now that I'm done with these changes, what I'm going to do now is show you a bunch of overrides. Now, if you worked with symbols, you're familiar with how you could make simple text overrides. So I'm going to go ahead and make some text overrides here. Whenever I do this, my spellings are always a mess.
It's the pressure.
Yeah. See? And then, so what I've done so far is I've taken the same copy of the component, made a bunch of copies of it, and then just overridden text. So the first thing you just notice is that you can actually perform text overrides on components. But that's just a very small step, right? Let's go a little more further. So the next thing you'll notice is you can actually even make style overrides. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and maybe change the rounded corner of this specific one. So let me open up my layer panel. And you can see that I can actually change the rounded corner over here. And it does not change across the other ones, right? So that's a really important thing to note, that with this update, we've also added support for style overrides. Now, the way you define style overrides is anything in the appearance panel on the right can be changed per instance. Now, let's say I decide the rounded corner has to be changed across all. The first step you need to do is go change it in master. So how do you go about doing that? You can simply right click on any of these instances and say edit master component. And we'll actually go locate the master for you.
Awesome.
And bring you right there. So you don't have to go about, searching through artboards or where you've left your master.
Which is, and the reason you like to keep it over separate here is just so that you don't actually make a change to it.
Exactly.
And it propagate to all of them.
Yeah, so that way I'm very explicit about when I'm making changes to the master and when I'm making changes to instances which are overrides. Cool. Now, I want to show you a little more complex use case of this. So over here, what I have is something a little more bigger than what we played around with. So I'm going to go ahead, select all of these. I'm going to convert this into a symbol. So you can see that it's now a master. It's got a little diamond on the top. So I'm going to make another copy of this. I'm going to take this and move it out because I don't want to edit the master at this point. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to place my master maybe on this board for now. All right. So now I have an instance out here. Just like before, I'm going to make a copy of this. So I made a copy of this. Now, the first thing we want to do is perform a text override like you'll just seen, right? So I'm going to go ahead and make that right now. All right, perfect. So I made a text override. What's the next thing I want to do? Obviously, the size is not right. So I want to change the size. Now, before I go to size, I also want to show you something that's very unique to components in XD. Now, typically when you create a component or a symbol, you need to have the same number of objects between the master and the instance. But in XD, that's not really a requirement. So what I'm going to show you is how to perform structural overrides in XD. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is drill down into my symbol by double clicking. And then I'm just going to delete something from there. And once I've deleted that, it is still in sync with my master. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and perform a size override. So you can see as I resize this, responsive resize makes my life really, really simple. Now you notice that something didn't align right. So I can simply double click, go ahead, drill down, and reposition objects right there for me.
Awesome.
And once that's done, I can bring that back over here. Now, if you notice, I've actually gone ahead and I've changed a bunch of stuff. I performed a text override. I performed a size override. I performed a structural override. Let's actually perform even a style override in this case.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead, open up my asset panel where I've curated all of the colors I need. And now I want to change the background gradient. So I'm going to pick maybe a different gradient in this case. So let's say I go with dusk. And you can see now I've actually performed another override, which is a style override in this case. So in total, this specific instance actually contains 4 different overrides: a size, a text override, a structural override, which is different number of objects, and then lastly, a style override.
Awesome.
And the beauty of all of this is if I go back and let me bring the master over here so you can see these change in real time. So now if I decide to make changes to the master component, you can see how they are still in sync across all of those instances. So components are really, really flexible in XD. They allow you to create some really robust components where you could have, different number of objects. You could have different sizes, different styles. Let me show you another little thing. Over here, if I decide to go ahead, open up my layer panel and I decide I want to add rounded corners, you can see how the rounded corners are actually syncing across all of those instances for me. So it gives you that flexibility of really creating, these components where you balance out different text overrides with bitmap overrides, with style overrides, all of that.
So a little bit more context to overrides. So it's basically done on a per object basis. So anytime you make an override to something, that one element will stop syncing, whether that's layout or appearance, they're tracked separately. So here, if you go to an override like the button that you've moved and you try and move the button in the master, that one will stay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then just to show you an example of how bitmap overrides work, let me ungroup this and rebuild it for you. So I'm gonna go ahead, delete this. In this case, I'm gonna convert this group into a component. Mm-hmm. And then all I'm gonna do after this is maybe use the repeat grid. Ooh. So I'm gonna use the repeat grid, create 4 copies of this, space it out a little bit. Once that's done, I'm actually gonna bring up a folder of images I have over here. So let's say now I go ahead, drop in an image there.
So now you can make overrides to repeat grid.
Yes. And all of my symbols are, my components are inside a repeat grid in this case. And again, the same principles apply. I could make text overrides, I could make style overrides. So it really starts coming together regardless of how you're using components. They could be inside a repeat grid, they could be inside a group. They could just be standalone ones as well. Cool. So that's sort of a really quick summary of it. And this is really powerful because what I have here, if you actually look at this, all of these belong to the same master. So when you look at this specific example, it looks so drastically different from this one and from this one, but they all fundamentally link to the same master component where it has the same background color, or maybe not the color in this case, but the same rounded corners, the same header text, subtext, buttons, all of that. Now, one of the other things I do want to call out is nested components.
Cool.
And we know that this is something we all work with. So when I was creating this, one of the things you might have noticed is I actually have these buttons as nested components inside my other component. Now, what this allows you to do is really build some robust components where, you could have a button as a standalone component that's put inside a card, and then you could easily swap these out. So let's look at a couple of examples of this, right? So I'm working with this, I'm working with an instance over here, and I decide that, when I drill down into this, maybe this one does not have it. Let's find one. Oh, there we go. Okay, so in this case, you can see when I drill down into the component, there's a nested component. And what I can do using my asset panel is simply swap them out. So when I drag a component over another component, you notice how the cursor gives me this little indication that it's about to be swapped out. So I'm swapping the paw icon with a mountain icon. And when I do that, what you're actually noticing is that components are being swapped.
Awesome.
So I could quickly do that by just simply dragging and dropping components over each other. This makes it really, really simple for when you're working with nested components, where you want to swap out a button with, maybe a different one. Now I know the whole swapping process is a little tedious because you got to drag from the asset panel, but the XD team is also working on states. And states is going to be another really interesting feature where we sort of enable you to create better organization around your overrides, how you swap them, how you reuse them. And then because XD is also a prototyping tool, they could be interactive as well. So there's a lot of more goodness coming to components in the next couple of months. So definitely stay tuned for updates.
Excited
yes.
for states.
So before I go forward, Hillary, was there anything else you want to talk about, like with components?
I think, do you want to talk about maybe if you accidentally delete your master?
Oh, yeah. So let's look at that. So I have this as my master component. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Now, if you notice, even when my master component's deleted, the rest of them are still perfectly fine. But what happens if I want to actually make changes that need to impact all my instances? You could simply right click and say edit master component. And what that's going to do is actually create create the master component for you.
Awesome.
So even if you accidentally delete your master component, you still have access to that on your canvas. Another great example of that was, let's say you make a bunch of overrides and you realize, hey, I wish, I want to reset this back to my master. All you have to do is right click and say reset to master component. And you can see how that specific instance actually rolls back to the master definition.
Which I think is super important with the flexibility that we've brought in here.
Right.
You know, if you accidentally make a change that you know you didn't want to do, you always have a way back.
Do you want to go through a couple of questions before we go
Yeah.
more through this? All right, let's see.
I think you've gotten a lot of shout outs for your color scheme.
All right. Oh, the comments are moving so fast I can barely keep up. Yes, so the issue that you experience around shadows with components, the team is actually actively working on fixing that. As well as the green border that you see sometimes, you know, even after you resize things, they're like at weird places.
Yeah, coming
The
soon.
team's working on addressing all of those issues. So stay tuned for those updates.
I did see a question of what XD is actually designed in. XD is designed in XD.
Yes.
So that can be super weird sometimes.
All right.
Cool.
You want to take one last question before we move on?
Yeah.
What if I want to remove the component with all instances? I have to look for them in every artboard. That's not good. So one of the things you can do using the asset panel is simply select this. And one is you could highlight on canvas, which shows you all of them on canvas. But secondly, you could also go ahead and delete it from here, which means you're deleting the master in that case. But that's actually good feedback for us to go and give the team, which is we should have an easier way to delete all your instances.
Yeah.
All right. Next thing,
Cool.
let's talk a little bit of collaboration.
Yeah.
So one of the things I mentioned at the start was with components, we actually want you to create design systems, right, in XD. And in order to do that, you need the ability to be able to share components across documents or have them linked. Now, one of the things you'll notice with XD is we've introduced a little plus button inside the asset panel on the top. And what this allows you to do is actually link assets. Now, before I jump into the use case of how you work across, a simple example of why would someone want to use this? Well, if you go to File and you say Get UI Kits, we actually support a bunch of different UI kits, the iOS Material and the Fluent Microsoft UI kit. So if you go ahead and download one of these kits, you could simply add them into your document using the plus button. So that way you always have access to like platform specific UI kits.
Cool.
But what happens if you're working with a team or a group of designers where you have one centralized, repo of components and you want to make sure all the other designers work with specific components? In that case, you want to be able to actually have a single source of truth, right? So what Hillary and me are going to demonstrate is a simple example of where Hillary is going to create a design system, a document that has the source of truth, and I'm going to start copying content out of it. And then as she makes changes to that, we'll see how those changes flow into my document.
Yep.
Sounds good?
Sounds good.
All right. So we're going to switch over to Hillary's laptop now. And we're going to see what she's going to take us through.
So we've got a little design system set up here for Compass, what Jonathan's been working on. Just got some character styles, some colors. We've got some buttons, some of the wireframes. And so I'm going to go ahead and share this with Jonathan. So we've got the share button in the top right-hand corner. And I'm going to go ahead and select the first option, which is invite to edit. So as soon as I pull this up, you can see I had previously invited Jonathan, so I'm gonna go ahead and re-invite him. But if he hadn't been there, I would have, just typed in his name here and then select him and hit save. But in this case, I can just undo it. I'm gonna invite Jonathan. Sorry for removing you in the first place.
And that's a great way of sharing your documents with other designers where you don't have to worry about, saving your file in a shared location, making sure the person has access and, permissions to all of that.
Looks like we're about to have chat and win in about 1 second. So we'll wait and see. Just say hi to some people in the chat. Hey, Sam.
Actually, yeah, the initial designs for XD were, if I'm not mistaken, were in Illustrator.
Oh.
Maybe a little bit in Photoshop as well. But that was actually, that's been an interesting journey where we've sort of switched and designed XD inside XD, and it gets tricky, but it's fun.
Yeah, every now and then you'll select something and be like that, have like a selection on it that's been designed up, and be like, why won't this unselect? But it's just in your file. Cool. So, hey everyone, Antonio wants stickers.
Everybody wants stickers. Stickers are the best.
Yeah. Actually, our computers have a lack of stickers on them.
I know. Actually, I got rid of mine because I'm getting a new laptop, so I want to save the good ones for the new one.
Good. Oh, and Vlad, you've won your sticker, so I think the team will reach out to you for more information on that. Cool.
XD Inception. That's exactly what we refer to it as.
Exactly.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So coming back to design systems with components. Yeah. So what Hillary did so far was she actually just could you open up the pop-up once more so everyone can see? So she shared.
Select the share up here in the right-hand corner, and then I've gone to invite to edit. So invite to edit means I want to invite another designer in, someone to work on this document with me. So again, you would go to add people, type in your teammate's name. In this case, I've already invited Jonathan, so you can see, at the bottom that I've already shared this with one person. I have myself, the owner, and then Jonathan. I can remove him at any time. Which we're not going to do right now. And then Jonathan now has access to that file.
Right. And what Hillary's done here, she just created components. She's designed a bunch of stuff just the way you would. And then essentially what I'm going to do is take her document and then reuse it into mine.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is, let me make sure, first of all, I've actually gotten access to that document. All right, so Compass Design Systems. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I clicked on the plus button out here, and I actually added the document from here that Hillary shared with me.
Yeah.
So all I had to do was I didn't even have to download the file. The file was a cloud document, so it showed up for me. And then all I had to do is click on the plus button. It showed up in my asset panel. So if you notice, my asset panel now has two options. I can switch between document assets, which are actually all my local components and my colors and my character styles. Or I could switch to Hillary's version where you can see everything has a link icon, letting me know that these were linked from a different document, right? In that case. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So one of the things you'll notice is that in my current design, the header for all these websites is actually a component. And all I've done is I've overridden text, images, a couple of minor things, and created different variations. We are going to build this from scratch. Cool. So I'm going to get rid of these across all three of my artboards. And I'm actually going to drag a linked component from my asset panel right here onto my canvas. So let's say I go ahead, do that over here. I'm going to send this to the back. Now you'll notice that the reason I know this is linked is because it has a green badge on the top left corner, which indicates that the source for this component is actually from another document itself. And then send to back. Now, what I want to show you before we start making a bunch of changes is how do actually updates, flow back and forth. Now, the first thing you'll notice is if I decide if I want to make changes to this, I can simply say edit master in source document. And what that would do is open up the document, Hillary's document, and allow me to make changes. Now that happens because Hillary's actually given me access to the document. Correct. But let's pretend like I didn't have access to the document, right? And in that case, let's say, Hillary makes a couple of changes. So Hillary, why don't you make maybe a subtle change to something just so that we can show them how updates flow before we get into the mix of things.
Sounds good. So here I have the component that Jonathan just pulled in. So I'm just gonna take maybe
Yep.
this menu item and add it to the top, and maybe I'll take everything else and scoot it down a little bit. And then I've edited this, so I'm gonna go ahead and save it, and then Jonathan will receive those updates.
Now, the way this works is, when changes are made to the master document, the consuming documents will get notified about these changes, right? And that's a really simple way for me to keep track of how changes go back and forth. Now, in this case, I've made instances of this across my surface. What I'm expecting to happen is to get a notification regarding, the changes that Hillary made in this case. Now, as always, when you want to demo something, things will not work out the way they're supposed to.
I think it just finished saving, so
Oh,
we'll have
perfect.
a few more seconds.
So we'll give it a couple of seconds. If not, we're going to try this once more, right? Oh, are we even in the same document? There's a pretty good chance I actually opened up. You know what? We're using the old document, and that's my mistake.
All right.
So we made a mistake live. Why don't we do this? Hillary, why don't you create a copy of this in a brand new document and share that new document with me?
Okay, can do that.
We've been practicing what we wanted to demo, and we've just been uninviting over and over again.
Okay, so now I just have a group here, and I'm going to hit Command K and just add that to my asset panel. And then I'm going to go ahead and share the document
Yes.
with Jonathan. Actually, I'm going to save the document first.
Yep. Let's call it the lost compass, considering the first compass didn't work.
That's good. I like that.
We got so many compass documents, we don't know what we're copy pasting from anymore.
All right, so that's saving. Now I'm going to go ahead and share it with you.
Yep. Oops.
Oops, sorry.
Share file it.
My bad. All right, I'm just going to find Jonathan. There you are. Select it. I can write a message here if I want to. I'm going to skip that this time and just hit invite. And you can see I got a confirmation that my invite has been sent.
So now I'm going to wait for Hillary's doc to show up for me. And I'm just launching XD. Right, there we go. Opened up my document. Let's see if I've actually gotten access to her document. All right, so it's not yet here. I'm just gonna go check if I have access to these. Right, is my Wi-Fi on? My Wi-Fi is on. This happens.
While we're waiting, maybe we can show some more overrides or something. You can
Yeah.
make some updates maybe locally.
Yeah, I could do that. Hang on.
Then you can
One
show the
second. All right. I'm actually curious where the file's gone. Let me see. Shared with you. So this is, so if you're not used the welcome screen, you can just head over. There we go. So you just head over to the shared with you tab, which is where you get access to all of the files that you've been invited to. Now in this case, actually, I'm going ahead and opening up Hillary's document on my machine out here. Additionally, I could simply go ahead, click on the plus button, add the document right away to my assets panel in this case, and should add the document. Oh, that document's open here. I'm going to close that. Let's try that once more. All right. Oh, which version of XD were you in?
Oh, shoot.
So here's another fun little detail. You notice how many XD icons I have at the bottom out here? That's because we've been working, we have like the public build, we have our own little internal build where we're testing new features.
I'm on the public.
You're on the public one?
Yeah.
All right, let's try that once more.
If it doesn't work, I can try again.
All right, you know what? Let's circle back to this one later.
All right.
Let's figure out what's happening on this. But in the meantime, we could also, so just doing a really quick recap on how components work, right? We spoke about size overrides, we spoke about text overrides, we spoke about style and structure. One of the things we wanted to show you right now is how linked components work between documents. We're having a bit of an issue, but we'll settle that and come back to this in a bit. Let's actually talk about prototyping with components and see how that works in XD.
Cool.
So let me bring up a simple example for this one. So in this case, now that I actually got rid of this, oops. So over here, if you notice, what I have is a component. You can see it has a green border. Now, if I decide I want to animate this, you can actually animate different overrides within a component. So what I'm going to do is make a copy of this in this case. And now when I drill down into this, I'm actually going to make some, changes to the override itself. So in this case, you can see I'm repositioning the background image. I've actually scaled it so it feels like you actually zoomed in a little bit on this one. Now, when I go to prototype mode, and let's say I select, just as an example, I'm just going to show you how you could animate the two. So if I click on the compass icon, I just want this to auto animate to the next screen. And I'm going to reduce this maybe down to 0.8 so you can actually see it play back. I'm going to go to my preview window, go full screen so you can see this. And when I click on this, you can see how it actually animated the background itself, right? And that's a really simple way of just animating overrides between the two. Another example of this is, let's look at this end-to-end flow that I put together. So what you're looking at is a bunch of different iPad screens. All of these actually have components that I've used to create. So you can see the green border. All of these are just different instances of it with, background image overrides, etc. So before I actually go ahead and wire anything up, let me give you a quick demo of how this whole interactive thing plays out. So I'm going to go ahead, click on this. Now what you'll notice is I'm actually using a time trigger to kick off a coach, like an onboarding experience.
Awesome.
And the little tooltip you're looking at is, again, a really simple symbol, a component which has text overrides on it. And I'm just animating the text overrides from different screens.
I love auto animate.
And then, the way I'm animating the mask is just creating a Boolean group. So the Boolean group allows me to simply just change the mask. Now I can say skip. And once that's done, I want to show you another little May feature that we shipped. Now, if you notice this little tent over here, it's a triangle. When I click on next, you see how it actually animates to a compass.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the new features we have, which is the Polygon tool in XD. So for those of you who did not know it exists, we've actually got a new tool right here in the toolbar, which allows you to create polygons. And you notice when I click on it, and let's say I draw something on my canvas, you'll see that the property inspector gives you a bunch of controls. So you can add more sides. You could change the rounded corner. And the beauty of this is it actually works for prototyping as well. So if I show you my original artboards, so let's go ahead and do that really quick. So what I have here is a simple polygon, which is inside a component, by the way. So here you can see that it's a simple polygon with 3 sides, as my PI indicates. And then what I've done is on the next screen, I've simply changed that to have 6 sides.
Awesome.
And all I have in prototype mode is a simple wire that basically auto animates between the 2 screens for me.
Cool.
So auto animate is a really quick way of just animating your polygons. So going back to this screen out here, now you notice I'm actually using my drag triggers to go back and forth between all of these artboards.
Cool.
So I'm using drag to simply create that carousel effect. If I click on one of these cards, which is a component, you can see how I've used the size override as a really quick way of resizing my components to fill up the screen, right? I go back to the other screen. One of the things I really love about this file is my little menu that I created here. Like the background blur is another cool, really cool appearance property that you can apply. And you can see how just with tweaking a couple of different values, I've been able to create this translucent menu, right?
Cool.
That actually reminds me of something really interesting.
Yeah.
how do you reuse your components with prototyping? So here's a great example of this. Now, if I had created this menu as a component, first of all, I can create that. Let's say I convert that into a component, right? Now, the reason you can't really see this is because it has a background blur. But imagine I create this as a component. I can then head over to prototyping mode and create an overlay. So if you look at this, I actually have the same menu that's wired across multiple artboards. So this is a really easy way of taking something that you know you want to reuse, creating that as a component so that your changes are all in sync. Then if it makes sense, you could use an overlay, which is a great way of wiring up that component across multiple screens, right? So what you actually just witnessed was the menu which was created as an overlay, which could then be accessed on any screen.
Awesome.
The same thing applies for the search icon. If I click that, it brings up a keyboard, which makes it really, really easy for me, to make changes from one place. Going with the same demo forward. So let's say I want to show you a couple of more examples. So I'm going to drag. You can see how this works. Now let's say, the onboarding's kicking in. So skip the onboarding.
Cool.
Now I click on this. You can see as I scroll, all of my content remains fixed on the top. Tomorrow we'll actually talk a little bit about how you can share this with stakeholders, get feedback, how you can share this with developers and what it means for them. But this is a fully wired up prototype, so you can switch between different tabs. You can see how it's actually animating between each component, which makes it really simple for you to keep your components intact, but at the same time prototype with them in different ways.
This is super cool. I mean, you've made a whole website here that's basically what, like 5 or 6 components?
Yep.
Super cool.
And it's really powerful because what you're really doing right now is taking this one little component that you have here and then just simply resizing it to a different size out here. And then again, within these are all different components, like you can see, where if I decide to edit the master for this one, and now I decide, oops, I got the wrong layer. Let's take this one, and then I make it like this. Now if I go back to all my instances, you got these cute little donuts across all your different variations. So that makes it really powerful to work with components across your screens, right? And let me see if these were the same. Oh, and these are the same ones used even on the web pages. So if you notice, even on the web pages, it's pulled those changes in.
So now you can reuse components across multiple screen sizes.
Right. And that's actually one of the most powerful things about being able to resize your components. You could keep switching between using the same components on your web artboards, on your mobile artboards, or on your tablet versions. So that makes it really, really powerful again. Cool. What else? Let's talk a little bit more about prototyping. So over here, here's another example of where within my component, I actually have a little path that I've drawn. And one of the things you can actually do with paths in XD is animate between them. So if you notice, all I'm doing is changing a bunch of anchor points, and I'm using auto animate to go between those two screens.
Super cool.
And that actually allows me to animate between them.
Cool. So components plus prototyping equals awesome.
Yes. And there's definitely a lot of more improvements coming to the way you prototype with components. I know one of the things you'll have been mentioning is, you wish you had the ability to create a wire from the master component and then just have it sync across all your instances. That's something we're actively working on. So giving you more flexibility over saying, once I wire up the master component to my destination artboard, I want to make sure all the copies leverage that same wire. So that's definitely something we are working on, and that will improve in the coming releases as well.
And then wire overrides. So if you change one, then it won't propagate to all of them.
Right. So here's a quick glimpse of, when I created this page, you could see I had all of my master components. I deliberately moved them out here. One of the things I did want to show y'all was, let me see if I can open up Hillary's old document
I think it's just shared in the one with you too.
Oh, it's not in here, but yeah, we basically the kind of overrides you can create are really complex with this. One of the other things we're also going to touch upon later is how you have linked colors and linked character styles. So for those of you who are working with the asset panel, obviously, you know, when you share your document, you don't want to just share components. You want to share the colors that have been used. You want to share the character styles that have been used. So being able to bring all of that in is another key feature we've been working on. I'm going to show you a quick example of, let's say if I actually went ahead and downloaded one of these UI kits, right? So over here, you can see I actually have, I'm going to go ahead and download the XD UI kit. One of the things I really love about this is the file size for XD. It's only 2.1 MB.
I know.
So I'm going to go ahead, download this onto my desktop. Done. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and do a file open. And I'm going to open this up. So I've got a sticker sheet. I want to save this as my own copy, right? And then get rid of it from my desktop. So I'm going to do a quick save as, convert this to a cloud document. And this was the Google UI kit. Whoops. Oh my God, I'm blind. I hate when my caps lock does that to me. Okay, save. So what I now have is a cloud document with my UI kit. So this is what the material team put together, right? So I can go back into my working document now, open up the asset panel, click on the plus over here. You can see I have the Google UI kit. I click on that and it should add my UI kit.
Awesome.
Oh, and you see even Hillary's file is here, weirdly. I don't know what went wrong, but that definitely didn't seem right that it took this long. Okay, so anyways, I've got the Google UI kit, so why don't I just play around with that for a bit.
Yeah.
So the first thing you'll notice is I actually have linked colors, linked character styles, linked symbols. So the way this is going to work is I do have a couple of Android screens out here. Let's see if there are a couple of symbols I want to bring in from here.
Vlad, we love your feedback. Keep it coming.
There we go. I'm actually going to switch to the grid view so I can see the preview nice and big. All right, let's go with this little bookmark icon. So I'm going to drag out this bookmark icon. Let's say I place it on my card over here. Perfect. And I want to make a couple of copies of this. So I'm going to keep moving it across a bunch of different screens. And just for fun, I'm going to add it only on 2 screens now. All right, so I've got this bookmark icon that I borrowed from this sheet. Now let's pretend that there's another version of me somewhere who controls this document. And I'm actually, yes, 2 Jonathans. And we're actually going to make changes to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually go locate that bookmark icon that I just used in this document. There it is. So I'm going to say edit master component and kaboom, something happened.
We need to zoom into that.
Maybe I need to say highlight.
It's so small.
Let's say highlight on canvas. It's so small that I can't find it right now. You know what? I'm going to trick it.
There you go.
There we go. The master didn't exist, my bad. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is actually go ahead and make a bunch of changes to this. So let's say I make that purple. I bump up the opacity a little bit. So I made all these changes. I go ahead and hit save. Now what this is going to do essentially is take all the changes I just made, save them, and then make sure that every consuming document gets notified that these changes have been made. So if I go back,
this is something you're doing, you know, for yourself between documents, but this can also be shared between teams for sharing assets. So cool.
Yep. So now if you notice when I come back to my actual document, there's a bit of a change. So the first thing you'll notice is the asset panel actually has a little bit of a blue dot, which indicates that there's something that's changed, right? There are updates available in this case. Additionally, you'll also notice that the icon over here has a little blue dot. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So if I hover over this, you can actually see that I get a preview of those changes right before I make them.
And you can also see those.
Exactly. Okay. So one of the other things was like, well, just seeing the preview in your panel is not helpful. You want to know how this impacts your design, right? So an easy way of doing that is by hovering over this, and you can actually see that the changes reflect on my canvas as well. So this is all I've done so far is I simply hovered over the icon, and I can actually determine how these changes made by another person is going to impact my design before I even decide to accept these changes.
Super cool.
And then I can go ahead and hit update all, and you can see how those changes were actually added to my canvas on that component there itself.
You can accept changes one by one as they come in on the individual assets, or that update all button at the bottom.
Right. And the colors work in a similar fashion. So for example, if I go ahead, select this component, you can see it has a gradient applied to it. But let's say I go ahead and apply a linked color from here. Let's see. Apply as fill. So I've gone ahead and applied that as a linked color. Now what that means is when I go back similarly to my original document, and I decide to edit this color. So let's say I say edit, and let's say I change this value to maybe a purple. Oops. And I hit save. Now what you notice is in my consuming document, I will again have an update for the color itself. And just like components, if I hover over the color, I can get a preview of it right there before I accept it.
Super cool.
This makes it really, really powerful and simple to work with shared colors, shared character styles, and shared components, right? Sort of giving you that flexibility to go back and forth between overrides and having a single source of truth.
Cool.
All right, why don't we look at some comments before we go forward?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's see.
What do we have here?
It's just got some chatting going on, some gaming notes in here.
Who needs a fan? Suddenly the whole conversation is about someone needing a fan. All right, preview on hover seems like my suggestion went through. Yes, preview on hover was always something we wanted to do from day one. We've just been rolling those features out gradually.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, the team never liked the idea of adding a little dialogue which said, this is how your component looked before and this is how it'll look after. So again, using everything as an opportunity to think about how could we do things more contextually? How could we bring it in context of your design so you can actually see all of these things there?
I don't know what the chat is talking about. We ran into mannequins.
Chris! So XD does have hover. Well, hover is one of those things we are actively working on, right? Yeah. I've said this a couple of times earlier as well on Twitter. Our first step towards sort of getting to some of these things were laying the foundation for components.
Yeah.
And with the May release, we've actually rolled out, components where you can create more robust overrides, manage them across your documents. The next thing is, we're going to be layering in states where you'll have much granular control over how you swap overrides, how you create instances, variations. And as a part of adding states, we are looking at interactivity. And trust me, we are all working on hover for sure. Hover will be there as a part of states.
We want to introduce it when it has most impact, right?
And to be honest, we could have added hover several releases ago, but we all know that having hover between two artboards is not the way you want to go about working in XD. Yeah. You don't want to have to create two different artboards simply because you want to create a hover state for a button, right? Imagine having to create so many artboards just to create a hover effect. So part of what we are doing is sort of trying to simplify that process with component states and hover. And trust me, that's something we'll roll out in the coming months for sure. Is there a smooth way to auto-animate between an organic shape to a geometric shape? That's an interesting one. So you could technically do that. What I would assume you would need to do is take whatever vector illustration you have, put that on one artboard. On the second artboard, create a polygon. And then maybe as a suggestion, what I would say is convert that to a path. So essentially break the polygon element type and make it a path by going to the object menu. And then just name your layers the same way. I'm assuming that should help you animate the two. If you want finer control over how they animate and the points, well, that's not something we currently have in XD. But you could definitely add that into user voice. being able to control the motion path for your animations. If that's something you'd love to see in XD, add it to user voice, upvote on user voice. The team would be, is constantly looking at that. So we would love to, see that bubble up onto the top.
Yeah, so what are some best practices that Adobe XD team uses for master design systems? So on the XD team, we do have a master document that has some of our UI in it. Ideally, that is going to be managed by one person, and then it is shared with the entire team, so we can pull in those assets as needed. Make changes to them with overrides, and then that one person managing the document will push out changes to us, and then we can accept those changes if we want to. So similar to what you just saw that Jonathan was doing between documents. He was the manager of that document. In our case, one of our other designers is the manager of the document, and then we'll just link to it.
Right. And a large part of how designers work and collaborate, not just among themselves, but with PMs, with engineers, is there are several other things that we leverage, right? We leverage Slack, we leverage email, we leverage the web prototype as well. And we'll actually talk about some of that tomorrow, which is how do you publish a prototype, review that, get feedback, incorporate those changes, push updates. On the last day, we'll actually talk a bit about integrations and plugins. So we'll talk about the Slack integration, we'll talk about Jira integrations, couple of other platform integrations that can also streamline your process, right? We understand that working in a collaborative environment means not just one tool, but a series of tools, plugins. And our hope with XD is sort of to become that platform where you're not just using XD, but you're using other tools like Slack for your communication, and it works well with XD as well. Let's see, do we have anything more? Can we get a live on the hover session when it's developed? When we get closer towards shipping the hover feature, I'm sure we'll be able to sneak it. Definitely tune in for day 3. I'll be sneaking something with regards to prototyping for the June release. Stay tuned for that one. Let's see what else.
We'll also be looking a little bit at CC libraries tomorrow around digital asset management. So
I think Samuel had a great question. Do you use the digital asset management in conjunction with XD? Samuel, that's actually something we've heard a lot of our users ask us about. Definitely something that we are considering as to how we broaden what is the definition of a design system. Like Hillary just mentioned, today we are only talking about components. Tomorrow we'll touch base a little bit about CC libraries, which expands how you work with XD and other Creative Cloud apps. And then eventually we are sort of looking at broadening that to encompass a couple of different things, like your DAM, which could be a custom one, or it could be Adobe Asset Management, all of these things. So that's definitely feedback we are constantly listening to, and we'll be prioritizing that in the future.
And also, this is a good point, Michael, too. We will be looking at using XD for presentations in this as well. So and using components in presentations. So we've seen some really cool things with that recently.
Yeah. In fact, actually, when I introduced myself at the start of the stream, I showed you a couple of slides of like the Dreamweaver mockup and the XD mockup. That was my actual presentation that I did last year at the Layers conference. And the whole presentation was actually done in XD. So in fact, the whole team uses XD for presentation in-house. It's been one of those use cases that we've just seen customers adopt. And we've been thinking of ways to make that even more easier in XD. So we'll touch a little bit upon that on maybe day 3, talk about how people are doing it, some tips and tricks on how to present with XD, stuff like that. Cool. Looks like Howard's got the rest of the questions. Hillary, I was going to say, why don't we try our luck once more?
Yeah, let's see. Hopefully.
I've got that hero image. Let's see if the demo gods are on our side today. Why don't you make one simple change and let's see if that comes through.
Okay, are we working with the
Compass design system?
Yes. Okay, cool. So moving back to my screen. So now we're just going to go ahead and just move, or maybe we'll just change the text size here a little bit. We'll just make this a little bit bigger. Maybe we'll center this for now. And let's see that come through. So I'm gonna hit save. We'll give that a second.
All right, and in the meantime, I just want to double check. You're using the Compass design system file, right?
Yeah.
So if I go back to my Compass design system file, these changes should automatically show up here for me, just the way I worked with a local document, right? In that case. So it doesn't look like it's going to come through. So maybe we'll have to circle back on this. We definitely messed up a bunch of stuff with our files. So we'll go clean that up and come back to it.
Maybe we can play with a few other things and see if it comes through too.
Yeah, or maybe we'll just hang on for a bit and see where that goes. In the meantime, I did want to touch base a little bit upon some other features in XD that we released in the May release. So the first thing we already spoke about this, which was the Polygon tool.
Yeah.
So in this case, you can see once I select the Polygon tool, I can simply create a triangle really quickly. So no more do you have to struggle with the pen tool to create a simple triangle. And once you're done with that, you can essentially just use the side count inside the PI and just toggle that to create, add
fun.
more sides, delete them. You could even change the rounded corner from here. So if you wanted to add some rounded corners to your polygon, you can do that really quickly from here. And then the rest of it is pretty much the same way. Like nothing's really changed about how you work with the tool. So you can add fills, background fills, all of that. And then like I showed you earlier, you could even animate between the two, right? So that makes it really simple to work with polygons. The other thing I want to talk about is text enhancements to XD. Now, one of the things we know we've been receiving a lot of feedback is on, hey, can we improve the text controls in XD, right? And what I want to show you today is a couple of text improvements we made in the May release. So the first thing you'll notice is you've got all these different options for managing your text case in XD. So you've got uppercase, lowercase, you've got title case. So that makes it really simple for me to select a piece of text in this case, switch it all to uppercase, switch it to lowercase, switch it to title case. And then taking this even further, you can select a piece of text. And in addition to underline, which you could always do, you can now even strike through in text.
Nice.
So we've introduced two new capabilities for text and text controls in XD. One is strike through and the other one is case management. In the coming months, you'll actually see more improvements to text. So things like superscript, subscript, and then some really fun appearance controls.
Cool.
I'm going to leave that suspense there. You'll see those changes soon enough. And then the last other feature I want to talk about is guides. So if you move towards the edge of an artboard, you can simply drag a guide, which allows you to position these in. And as you drag, you can see this little blue badge, which gives you measurement, your XY coordinate. And then you can simply keep dragging your guides to create all of this. You can even copy paste guides from one artboard to another artboard. You've got some options inside here to show hide guides, to lock all your guides. You can do all of that. You can even delete guides by dragging them off your screen. So that makes it really simple to align stuff. There was one little trick where if you hold down shift while dragging a guide, it actually jumps in increments of 10. So if you want to move your guide in increments of 10, just hold down the shift key and that allows you to do that. What else do we have? Oh, and then the last big feature for the May release, which I worked on, was keyboard and gamepad triggers. So we're not going to demo that today, but if you haven't checked that out, Howard has a whole bunch of fun videos and examples that he's been using to create using keyboard triggers and gamepad triggers. And yes, for your presentation use cases, the keyboard triggers are going to be perfect examples. So that's going to be really powerful for creating your presentations. We got a question from Samuel. Can you span guides across all your artboards? So you cannot span your guides across all your artboards at the moment. What we've been focusing on is sort of just allowing you to reuse them on the same artboard for your alignment. You can still copy paste your guides across artboards, but we are looking at taking this existing concept and taking it even further, where you can have your guides span across your artboards. Now, building guides and rulers is something we've done traditionally across all our tools, right? Illustrator, Photoshop, all our tools have guides and rulers. But with XD, we've been trying to experiment and understand, why would someone use a ruler? Why would someone use a guide? So we've taken this approach where we are starting small with guides on the same artboard, and then we'll expand the same concept further to allow you to have guides across all your artboards. And sort of just questioning as to where does ruler fit into the whole workflow as well.
All right, so I tried sharing another version with you. Let's just give this one more shot and see if you can pull in, it's just called test.
Oh, it's just called test?
Oh wait, hold on, I have to share it with you. I've just created it.
All right.
Let's see if it's
gonna make this work today.
Yeah, let's see if it's my build issues. Sometimes internally we have some issues that other people don't get just because we have a couple builds.
I'll make sure I'm on the right version as well. Yeah, you can see we have like 2 different versions out here at the bottom where sneaked features. So yeah, let me see if I go back to my shared with you document.
You have test, yeah?
Oh, there we go. So testing showed up 32 seconds ago. That's a good sign.
Let's
All
try
right,
this
the next
one.
thing I want to do now is, first of all, let me just get rid of all these other documents I've linked just to make it really simple. So I'm going to switch to my document assets. I'm going to go ahead, click on plus, switch to shared with you. Just added the testing. So there's something really going wrong. And I'm going to go fix this after the stream.
Something just added.
Oh, there we go.
There we
Okay.
go.
Just took a second to show. Okay. So it has a bunch of icons in this case. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and start working.
I'm going to add some components and then you can see how at the same time, potentially you will.
Okay, while you do that, I'm just
some
going
new
to make sure we
things.
capture some answers here. Is this a UI kit? It's essentially a regular document, which is a cloud document in XD. So you could create your own UI kits and then just share those documents with other designers as long as it's a cloud document. Will we be able to do color management in XD? Every picture or color in XD is extremely saturated. So Sander, yes, that is something we are actively looking into as to what it means for color management. Now, if you notice, we don't have preferences in XD, and that's intentional. We want to keep XD lightweight. So part of what we're trying to do is figure out a more user-friendly way of managing color profiles in XD. In fact, actually trying to figure out a way in which we could get the color profile right without you having to do any work to get there, right? So that's something we are definitely looking into. We're thinking about color profile management on several levels. One is as a designer, when you're working on your machine, how do you see your color management? As a developer, when you export assets, is the right profile being exported? As a stakeholder, when you publish it to web, are they seeing it in the right color profile on web? So trust us, we are actively looking into the color management thing. XD is a huge ecosystem, so we're trying to make sure we get it right across all the different surfaces. Aligning, so there a gap ruler would be handy to see distances between components and the button. You can actually do that in XD today. If you hold down the Alt key and you click on different objects, you actually get measurements. Oh, we need to switch back to my screen for a quick second. Oh, Hillary, okay.
That's fine, because you've got updates also, so we can.
So here you can see as I hold down Alt and I click, you can actually get measurements between different objects. So that's something that you can actually do in design specs as well as on your canvas itself. Okay, there's a question for me from Vlad. Vlad has all the questions. Since you're a PM, I'm pretty curious. So will you ever consider having XD running in a browser rather than a standalone app? Bum, bum, bum. So one of the things we have been thinking about XD is how do we make it accessible to every single designer, right? And that's been a core principle as to how we've been building XD. The fact that we went and built 2 native apps, one for Mac and one for Win, just so that we could leverage the right platform in the right way, is just an indicator that we are invested in expanding this across different platforms. Now, what you've noticed is we actually do have a web presence. So when you publish a prototype, you can access the prototype in the browser, you can comment, you can do a bunch of workflows. Do we want to expand that to have beyond what we currently offer? The team is constantly thinking about those things.
Yeah.
We have a mobile app as well on iOS and Android.
Right.
Do we want to do more than what we offer? again, those are all different areas that the team is actually investing in. Some of y'all might be lucky enough to participate in some of our user tests and research, where we've been talking to designers about, hey, imagine if you had XD on a mobile device, what would you want to do? Or imagine if you had XD in the browser, what would you want to do, right? So those are conversations we are constantly having. I think the key for us is to figure out what workflows make the most sense for you in the browser, what workflows make the most sense on desktop, and make sure we provide the right balance between all of those for them.
Yeah. And then Samuel, just as a note, any features you think XD is lacking, definitely check out User Voice. We check there often for features that we're looking to introduce.
Yep.
It's one of the top places we look.
Yes. So definitely upvote things like this on User Voice. I'm pretty sure there's a web version request, there's an iPad version request, there's a Linux version request, there's an Apple Watch companion app request. So if these are things that you feel from your personal workflows is something that blocks you from using XD, go upvote on User Voice. The team's constantly watching that.
Cool. So you'll notice that Jonathan has this update indicator here. So another thing that you'll get with when you link to a design system is is when you add new components. So not just changes that have been made. So if the design team decides they need a new component and can add it in, and whoever is linked to it will get the update that new components have been added, and you'll see those get added to the asset panel.
Right. So now I'm going to go ahead and drag out this component that I always wanted from the start of the stream. Finally going to place this out here. I'm going to make one more copy of it right now.
Why don't you make a few changes to them?
Yeah, and you can keep, so this is the beauty of components. Hillary can keep working on them. I can keep working on my instance. And then once she's done, she'll hit save. And then, you'll see how changes go through. So, got that there. So I'm going to make a bunch of changes out here. Maybe not that. All right, so I made some text overrides. I probably want to drop in some images as well, right? So let's say I'm going to go ahead and drop that image over there. This is what I love with components. You can just build out a really quick template, share that with someone, and then the other user can simply go ahead and start, adding a bunch of stuff, tweaking colors, tweaking all of those nice looking things in there. Okay, so all I've done is I've performed a text override, I've performed an image override or a bitmap override. I almost got it looking like the way I want. Now, if you notice while I was working, I actually got a bunch of changes from Hillary again. So I see an update button at the bottom. I also noticed that my asset panel has a blue icon near that. So now I'm really curious to know what Hillary's changed. Now, I don't want to lose my stuff. So before I decide to hit accept, I'm just going to hover over this and see the changes. And there you can see, I'm just going to hover over it and leave it. What Hillary has done is she's actually blurred out my beautiful image, which is great. Now you can't see the image anymore. She blurred out the image and she's also changed the font family. So I'm going to move that out again. This is what I had. These are the changes that Hillary made. I'm going to accept them because I think they're good. And then I'm going to hit on the update all button. And you can see how those changes actually came into my document. So this is really powerful because it allows you to have one single source of truth, one centralized place where you can go make all of your component changes and then have all your consuming documents sort of borrow those, inherit those changes right there for you.
Super
cool. That's a quick glimpse of how linked components work in XD. We already looked at color and character style, so that works in a similar fashion. Did anyone have any more questions around components? Like, this is your chance, shoot. Things that you find buggy, things that you find missing, things that you would love to see in XD. I'm more than happy to try and answer some of those for you. So Samuel had another point. I've been talking to a friend in animation about XD and we found a few things that would be great for XD that XD lacks now. Samuel, I would love to know what are those things that we could improve for sure. Is it possible to have animated components like animated menus or menu prototypes that can serve as a component? Julian, you're definitely shooting for the stuff that we are working on right now. So like I mentioned earlier, the first step was components. The next step is sort of helping you organize your overrides better with states. And as a part of that, being able to add interactivity between them so that you could fully bake a component that does not just have different variations, but also has interactivity as a part of it. So definitely look out for future updates, Julian. That's something that the team is actively working on. And then let's see, do we have anything else coming in? Chris, hi. Chris is my number one fan, I can tell. Chris is always around, whether it's Twitter, whether it's in real life, or whether it's on Behance now. But yeah, definitely check out some of the videos that even Chris and Howard make. Beautiful stuff. Howard has some great tutorials on how you get into components, deep dive into that. Do you have an estimate when states will be released? This is a question I get almost every single day. Now, a part of how we build XD is we focus on quality, right? So at this point, I do want to say, we don't have an estimated timeline. I want to say, keep checking. We have monthly updates. You'll see a lot of progress in the coming months. And we have a big conference towards the end of the year, the Max conference, where we always sneak in a lot of goodness. Definitely stay tuned for all of that.
So we've got about 8 minutes left until we get to the daily challenge. So is there anything else you want to demo?
I could show you some of the other examples I put together with this file. So this is just another example of where I've been using components as a part of, prototyping together an entire flow. So here you can see, again, similar to the iPad app, I've got different components here. The button states constantly change because they're color overrides in this case. When I click on this, you can see how it animates to the next version. All of this is created using auto animate, and then a little bit of repeat grid as well. So here you can see how I'm using a time trigger to animate this.
Super cool.
One of the things I love doing is sneaking in little details on how to animate stuff. So here's something I tried a while back. All right, here we go. So you notice how on this screen, my compass icon is actually a symbol, right? And it's basically pointing in a specific direction. Now what I want is when I drag it to the next screen, I can actually use overrides in this and rotate it. So rotation is another little override that you can perform. So I'm going to rotate this over here. And now when I've already wired up the two outboards with auto animate, right? So notice when I start dragging this, you see how the compass icon actually rotates with my drag. That's another little subtle way of sneaking in some motion with your components where it's a part of an override. So when I actually go to the next screen, you can see how it switches to that override in that case.
Super cool.
And then going back, we'll probably save this for another day, but I have a really fun demo with voice and components and how you could actually use components with voice prototyping and all of that.
Awesome.
All right.
So just a recap of what we've talked about so far. So you can make components, you can share those across teams with other designers, you can share your file with other designers, so you can both be working in the same file and have that single source of truth. What else? You can animate between components.
And in terms of the overrides that you can perform several different overrides. So quick recap: text overrides, bitmap overrides, size overrides, rotation overrides, structural overrides. And for those of you who may have joined in later, structural overrides are basically, you can have different number of objects in master and the instance. So imagine a classic case of a dropdown where the master is the collapsed dropdown, but one of the instances or the copies of that may have an expanded version of the dropdown. And then the last one is style overrides, where you can change any of the appearance properties. One thing I forgot to mention while we were demoing all of this is when you override a specific property inside a copy of a symbol or a component, if you change a property in master, we will only sync those properties which have not been overridden.
Correct.
So let's say I made a change to the background color in one of my copies, and then I went ahead and I changed the background color in master. you wouldn't see the background color change for that specific instance because you've made a custom override to the background color there itself. So those are some of the key highlights around working with components in XD. The other thing I would encourage you to look out for is the asset panel, which is a really powerful tool if you're working with components, colors, character styles, where you could have linked colors, linked character styles, linked components. It also actually gives you a glimpse of your missing font. That's another little thing.
Super cool.
And then you could just simply right click and say replace font, which allows you to pick a missing font. So getting rid of all those missing fonts in your document.
Cool.
And then in your asset panel, you could simply switch between list view, grid view, which gives you the ability to optimize for what you're trying to achieve. So I personally like to work with the grid view when I know what I want to do.
Right.
So for example, dragging out components, all of that. But I tend to switch to my list view, especially when I get a shared document, just so that if Hillary told me to go use, let's say the badge component, that way I can see the label really quickly and I can simply drag the badge out.
Cool.
Another key thing about working with it in the list view is being able to rename, being able to reorder, so you can organize your colors in a specific way. I have this huge OCD around having my colors organized nicely. So I like to organize all the colors in their specific section. You can clearly see I do a pretty bad job at naming my colors, like light orange and then another orange. So that's how I name my colors at least. All right, what else do we have for today? And so what we're going to be covering in day 2 and day 3 is, again, focusing a lot more on how you can collaborate with XD. So the first thing we'll touch base tomorrow on is on 3 specific areas. As a designer, how do I collaborate with another designer, right? So we'll talk about how you share documents, how you work with components, which we covered today. We'll focus more on how you work with the stakeholder.
Awesome.
And the way we define stakeholder is anyone who has to review designs or work with you as a part of your team. So being able to publish a prototype, and we'll deep dive into what are the options you have there. Can you create a password protected prototype? Can you create a private prototype, a public prototype? Can you invite someone specifically to the prototype? How can you leave feedback, annotate, all of those things we'll deep dive tomorrow. We'll also talk a little bit about how do you work with a developer in XD. So if you've been creating redline specs or manually speccing out measurements, you're in for a treat tomorrow. So definitely tune in to check out how we've implemented design specs and how you can leverage that. And then finally, we'll also cover a little bit about working with CC libraries, which is a way of bringing in content from other Adobe applications into XD. And then we'll also talk about opening up Photoshop documents, Illustrator documents. And for those of you who are, who love After Effects, we'll also cover how you can export to After Effects right from XD. So a lot of that coming tomorrow as well. And on day 3, we'll talk a little bit about collaborating using plugins, integrations. We'll actually do a little bit of presentations with XD and show you how you could leverage XD for presentations, whether it's presenting a concept within your own team, gathering feedback, whether it's actually using XD for a presentation at a talk or a conference, or just using it as a mood board. We'll cover some of those use cases as well. And then, yes, I do plan to sneak one of the June features on day 3. All I'll tell you, it's a prototyping feature, so definitely tune in for that piece. And then what else? Let's see. Any last closing questions we have here?
Implement GIF and video on XD.
So GIF and video is another really is a top priority feature for us. We are thinking about what it means to implement GIF and video. I think you're going to add something?
I would say the team, we always make decisions on one of the key values of XD is performance.
Yes.
So when we do this, we want to make sure we can support it and do it right.
Yep. And the team's actually working on trying to figure out what's the best way to allow users to add video and GIF such that it does not bloat up your file size. It does not lead with issues where, oh, what if you delete the video? Is my prototype broken? How can you publish a prototype to the web? All of that. So it's on the roadmap. We are thinking about it. All right. What's next?
So we're gonna look at if anyone has any of their challenges, go ahead and post those. We're gonna do some design feedback next. Give a few minutes. Let's see.
You can use artboards as a workaround for GIF.
That's true.
That's actually
you can,
smart, yeah.
We've seen some cool animations come in through just using artboards and auto animate.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty cool demos of people actually putting together an entire sort of keyframe animation using XD and artboards. Vlad, we missed you. Hope you had a good lunch. We got to get some lunch after this.
Yeah.
The session for tomorrow, will it be very interesting too? Yes, it will. We'll be doing a lot more prototyping tomorrow. And we'll talk, and I just mentioned we'll be talking about, collaborating with CC libraries, collaborating with a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, we'll be covering all of that as well. Cool. So looks like we don't have any questions or we don't have any key design. All right. Dinner in Copenhagen. Sure, we come. Wait, I saw a question around multiple pages. What about multiple pages? The canvas is unfortunately limited. Lorenzo, definitely that's something we've been hearing a lot around, the canvas being limiting in size or like the need for multiple pages. Just the way we approach guides and rulers, we are thinking about pages in a slightly different way. The first thing is we want to think about how can we improve the canvas size, and that's something we are thinking about. The second thing is with the introduction of states and a couple of more concepts, we will reduce the need for multiple artboards, which will help declutter your canvas area, right? And we are sort of trying to figure out what's the right balance between components and pages, because at the end of the day, it helps you solve the same similar situation. Now, pages does have a separate use case, which is organization. And we are going to figure out how we can support some of that without like adding a lot of bloat into XD. So again, I would say, keep upvoting it on user voice. Whenever we are ready to sort of focus on that, we'll sort of post questions on Twitter saying, hey, is anyone willing to give us a couple of minutes of their time to talk about pages? How would they like to use it in XD? Make sure, you wave your hand. We'll touch base with you. We'd love to get your feedback. If not, you know where to find me on Twitter. My handle is Jonathan Pimento. Just go leave me a tweet. I'll follow up with you. And we can chat more about that for sure.
Cool. So it looks like we got one submission that we can review. And no worries if you guys are still working. As it says, you can submit those and we'll review them tomorrow at 1 p.m. as well. But so for the meantime, we have this one from, I hope I pronounced her name right, but I believe it's Amara. And it looks like it is a resort kind of booking website.
I have to say, I love the fact that the navbar on the top has a blur.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things to do always. Like just add a blur. And actually, can you scroll the artboard?
Let's check.
Oh yeah, it does. So one of the things I would say is pretty cool is if you actually make the navbar fixed navbar. And Hillary, do you want to show them how you create something as fixed? Like maybe just show them the checkbox.
So if I had like a scrolling site like this, if I wanted to have, something fixed, I'm just gonna select it and then.
That's inside a component, right? So because this whole thing is a group right now.
Make a new. Thing. So say I had like my logo here, I can select this and say fix position when scrolling. So that way, when I scroll, that stays there. Yeah,
and the beauty of this is with your background blur, it will look really nice because your navbar would be completely fixed on the top and you would see the background blur render in real time.
Yeah, that would look super cool.
Yeah.
Cool, so it looks like we've got a resort app and you have got a home, you can send messages, it looks like you have friends you can connect with, and then at the bottom here there's a book now. So I'm going to try and click on that. Let's see.
doesn't look like that good. What about the top nav bar?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. So I think it's a single page.
Okay, so let's just go to the next one and see what we have here.
So so that's another thing. You could actually wire up all your pages using prototype mode. So you could actually wire up all of these pages in prototype mode so they navigate across.
So it looks like you're creating a carousel, I think. And what I can see is, I'm not sure where the hit spot is, but when you go to the next one, it changes the image out. So it looks like maybe you created a component with some
Component would be a great use case for this.
Some image overrides and the next item in the carousel here. And then let's look at the last one.
Oh, I like this.
Super cool. Yeah, this is an awesome use case for a component.
Right.
Sort of similar to like what you did for your header in the camps thing. So this is awesome.
Probably scroll down a little bit.
I think it's just my...
I think the home page had more, right?
I'm not sure. I think that was just my
oh, okay.
my screen.
This is great.
Yeah.
Now, if you had a search bar on the top, I'm assuming you would want to bring up like a little pop-up where you can search. Again, that's another great use case for creating overlays. So you could use overlays to create your little search pop-up over there. And then, like we said, the fixed nav bar on the top would be a great addition to what you have.
Yeah, this is super pretty though. Love the imagery.
Yeah.
And then, like eventually...
I just noticed even the text has background blur.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I just love background blurs. You can tell by the fact that I have it everywhere in my document. But yeah, actually, I might have a simple use case to show you what to do with the fixed element. If we switch back to my screen right now. So here you can see that I've actually created a nav bar on the top, which is fixed. So you could do something like that as well for your design where you keep that fixed. And then for the search, in this case, I bring up the keyboard. But since that's a website, you could sort of bring up maybe a search box, and that could work as well.
Amir, I just see that it's a drag, and it does work. Sorry about that.
Oh, we're going to switch back to Hillary's.
Yeah,
right?
so if I'm on the first screen, I can go ahead and drag it to the next one.
And that's even better than I imagined. Now, drag is another really great trick. I'm so glad you actually used it. That's perfect. And that actually reminds me of something interesting, which is we wish, several users have wished for like better hotspot feedback in the browser and on desktop.
Yeah.
And again, that's on user voice. If that's something you often run into, go upvote it. That's something we could actively look into. Sure.
Another trigger option for this could be a time trigger.
Yeah.
Something that you see with carousels that they will automatically go through. That could be something cool to look into as well.
Sure. Yep.
All right.
Awesome.
Oh, Jonathan, you're getting called out for your
Vlad's calling me
search not being aligned.
Vlad, you and me are going to have to chat. You're going to fix all of my designs up. We're going to fix all the rounded corners and the alignment. Awesome. What else do we have?
I think that's it.
I'd love to hear if y'all have any feedback around, what prototyping features are missing in XD. I think someone already mentioned video support and GIF support. If there's anything else in addition to that, we've touched on hover. Just assume hover's coming. We're working on it. But in addition to that, if there's anything else, if you can think of it right now, if not, we're going to be back tomorrow and the day after. So these are all opportunities again for you to sort of give us that feedback if we missed anything.
Yeah, and again, keep working on your design challenges. We'll have more time to review those tomorrow. And I think on Thursdays, some portfolio reviews as well.
Right.
So
I'm guessing we have some more time on the stream as well, right? So why don't we do this? Why don't we actually do a couple of prototyping demos?
Sure.
And show them how you can prototype in XD.
I love prototyping demos.
Yeah, I love prototyping as well. All right, so what I'm going to do is actually show you, since we were talking about drag, why don't we do a couple of examples with drag, right? So here I have an artboard. You can see that I actually have a bunch of cards. Now what I want to do is create a quick little, drag interaction between these cards. So I'm going to go ahead, place this over here. I'm going to leave an edge of the next card so I can see it. And now I want to be able to drag this between the two screens, right? So what I'm going to do is go ahead, duplicate this artboard. And now on this variation, I'm actually going to move the position of this. So I'm going to move this one off, move this one back on the screen here. That's all I've done. I'm going to switch over to prototype mode. I'm going to select this card. I'm going to wire it up over here. And now there are a couple of things you need to do over here. So the first thing is you've got your trigger drop down where you can pick different triggers. So I'm going to pick drag. And then you can see it automatically picks auto animate as the function. Now, one of the things I really love to do with drag is change my easing to snap. Snap was specifically designed for drag interactions, right? So I'm going to pick snap over there. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to wire this one back. So in this case, maybe I should leave a little bit of the previous card. So I'm going to wire this one back up over here, and it's got a drag interaction. Now, all I've done is just duplicated the two artboards, move the position, wired up the drag, and you can see how easy it is for me to actually create a drag interaction, right? And this is again the simplicity of like how we've enabled prototyping for animation in XD. Now you can actually go even further and create some, fun little effects. One of the things I love to do is, when a user's dragging, I love to be able to maybe change the background image scale or like the position of it. So for example, if I actually, let me see, I open up the background here. I'm gonna scale this a little bit.
Cool.
Oops. I have like multiple gradient layers on top. Okay, so let's say I do this. And now what you'll notice is when I actually go to my preview window and I dragged, that's not right. I actually broke my component a little bit here.
I think it's just the top layer moved.
Yeah, maybe I move.
There you go.
Okay, so now what happens is when I'm dragging, you can actually see the image, like the background image zoom in and zoom out.
Awesome.
It's almost like you get that little effect over there. So you can do a whole bunch of these little things with that. Now, let's say you want to animate from a tap to another state, right? One of the things I try to do is I duplicate this artboard. And now let's say when you tap on the getting started card, you want that to fill up your entire screen. So the first thing I'll do is actually take all of these remaining cards over here. And I'm going to maybe reduce the opacity to 0, not of this one. Or I could simply delete them, whichever one's more convenient.
Right.
I just like to reduce the opacity just in case I need them, so it's there. So I keep this over here. What I'm now going to do is go ahead, select this. It's a component with responsive resize. So I can actually resize all of this over here. So I can actually go drill down, move this button over here. Looks like the text got off-centered, so I'm going to reposition that. Maybe, don't hate me, but I'm going to make this button even longer. Alright, so I'm going to put that over there. And then let's say I move, I move this on the top. Now this is just to give you an example of what you can achieve in XD, right? So I switch over to prototype mode, I select this, I wire it up over here. I'm going to switch this to tap. And then when I switch it to tap, you can see I can still drag between the two. But when I tap, it actually animates to that specific state, right?
Yeah.
So that makes it really easy for you, to animate between different states or different overrides of components. And that's exactly how I've put together this entire flow that I have over here. One other cool thing that struck me was I wanted to show you an example of, let's say, where is the one that Hillary shared with me? Was it Compass Design System? Let's open that up and see. I was actually, you see, there were changes to this. And, Will Smith went away. What the heck? I actually put that in there so that I remember where I had to go. I want that back now. Anyways, So here's another really great example of what you could do with components. So I have this entire design system of like different buttons that are laid out here. If you notice, this is actually linked, interesting. So because it's a linked one, if I say edit master and source document, now it's going to open up my source document. My Will Smith's not even in this one now. Anyways, I'm going to bring him back in one of my next files. So here you can see I've got the master component. If I select this and I start resizing it, you can see it's actually impacting all the instances out here. I've actually created so many different variations of my button just from one master component. And this is not just some concept, but it's essentially what we've taken from Adobe's own design system called Spectrum and just created that using XD in this case. So you can see if I move the label around, it moves. And the way I've gone about doing this is my master. This is an instance where I've performed color overrides. So it's a style override.
Right.
In this case, it's actually a structural override because I've deleted the background. Or if you don't like deleting stuff, you could simply turn down the opacity, which is again a variation of an override, which is a style override. Yeah. And then you can see I've just been building on top of those overrides to create this robust system around all my different button variations. So for example, if I decided, hey, guess what? These are all square buttons going forward. Boom. That's it. It's like one simple change to the rounded corner. All my button variations have that. So this is just another cool example of what you could do. I actually love to have colors out here, but after we've had introduced linked colors, I usually put all my colors right here into the asset panel. So it's linked. That way I can make changes across it. I also like to sort of templatize a lot of my controls. So you can see all my checkboxes, my radio buttons, all of those are sort of segregated. This is actually a pretty, in-depth example of what you could build with components.
So a lot of these examples, like Jonathan said, are pulled from our internal design system, Spectrum. So you can see how flexible it is with just even like these simple components.
Yeah. And the beauty of all of this is you could have all your wireframing elements, you could have all of your high fidelity elements, all baked inside the same document itself, right? So that makes it really, really easy to work with all of these components in that. Let's see, what else do we want to cover today?
I think we just have a few minutes left, so if you have like one last thing you want to show.
Let's see, I think there are a couple of questions here. I've been layering and hiding layers of my components for things like buttons and form fields. Tara, that's actually another great suggestion. Like one of the things we've noticed is like components give you the flexibility of working in the way you want, right? Now, some designers are more comfortable with just deleting objects across instances when you want to create different overrides. For some, it's, being able to toggle visibility or even opacity. There are different ways you can go about doing it. Actually, I love what Tara does, which is what I also tend to do quite often, which is I hide my layers by either hiding it from the layer panel, or sometimes I just turn off the reduce the opacity to 0. That's a great way of making structural changes where you still have them across your instances, but you're just not showing them. That's one of the things.
I feel like that's a pro tip from the prototyper side.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually a pretty good point. Like if you play around with visibility, it makes life so much more easier. If at a later point you decided, oh crap, I did need that little icon over there, right? Plus from a prototyping standpoint, you never know when you need things, especially when you're animating stuff. So it's always good to play around with the opacity and have that in there, just so that you can, turn it on when you need to.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what font is used on this artboard? Looks like Howard's already to the rescue out there. I actually have a bunch of different fonts. All the fonts I'm actually using in this document are from Typekit. So if you go to, Adobe fonts, not Typekit. If you go to Adobe fonts, you'll find all of those fonts right there for you. And you could quickly add them. I can switch over to design mode to show you which I've been using. So my header text everywhere is interstate. I think I'm also using Open Sans in a couple of places. Oh, it's interstate over there as well. let's see, what other fonts did I use? Hero, this is probably Cubano. Yep. And then this one's Interstate. I'm actually impressed at the fact that I only use 2 fonts in the same file. I typically don't. I use more than that. Oh, there we go. Open Sans. It had to be there somewhere. But that's actually a pretty good question. What if I wanted to know every single font I've used in my document, right? This is dangerous, but you could marquee select all of your artboards or hit Command A, which selects everything, and then click on the plus button to extract every single character style. I always love doing this live so everyone can see the chaos in my life unfold.
Oh man.
And those are every single character style that I have in this document. Now, if you're wondering why I have, that's because the asset panel just extracted every single variation of font size, font weight, font color. And this is precisely why you need a design system, so you don't end up with a document like this. But yeah, that's literally a lot of character styles. God alone knows what happens if I hit plus on colors. Let's try. Not too bad. At least I've cleaned up my colors. You got some weird grays and weird pinks.
You can just have so many variables of text.
Yeah, it's just like, every time you create a sub-range of text and change questions, change stuff, it gets saved as a new one. But that's why we don't automatically add any of this to the asset panel. Everything you need to do is an explicit action that you take so that you can choose what you want to add. All right. So before we wrap up, any last questions? Vlad has one. And he's also warning us it's a blunt question. How does one get a job at UX designer role at Adobe to end up one of those live streams? Ha! Yes.
That's a good question.
We actually have, what's the Adobe design website? I keep forgetting that. Let me see if I can bring that up really quick.
Yeah, I think it's just like the careers page, is it?
Feel like, there we go.
Yeah.
So if you go to the Adobe.design, that's the page. There's a section called Browse Jobs. Definitely, look out for any openings that you find interesting. This is across Adobe, so not just XD. You could go look out. There's a lot of good content from the design team there.
Yeah.
Talks about how they work, what kind of work they're doing, what are the new areas they're exploring. So Vlad, I would encourage you, go down there, hit the button, browse jobs. You know where to find us otherwise on Twitter. Reach out to us if you are interested in something specific. Happy to put you in touch with the team to talk about what that role offers, or in terms of what kind of work you would be doing, what kind of products you'd be working on. So yeah, a lot of designers from Adobe are on Twitter. We are on Behance. You should reach out to us, ask us what our day-to-day looks like. Totally. Hillary is one of them, so definitely reach out to Hillary, ask her questions about what does she hate about working with a PM, stuff like that. She'll give you honest feedback. But yeah.
Yeah, and we'll also be doing portfolio reviews on Thursday, so that's always a good time to get some feedback as well. I think we do them weekly, so.
Yep. Yeah. And between now and tomorrow, if there's something specific you want to see us cover on the live stream, reach out to me on Twitter. Drop me a quick message saying, hey, I want to, could you guys deep dive on this? More than happy to do that. Otherwise, stay tuned. There's a lot of more stuff tomorrow and the day after.
Yep, and as mentioned, don't forget to check out the design challenge and post your work for tomorrow. We'll be taking a look at that again at the last half hour, reviewing that work as well. Cool. So yeah.
Awesome. I hope you guys had fun, and see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.